Okay, so we gathered via Zoom for another sculpture forum discussion, and I am joined by the usual crew, Jock Ireland and Brandt Junceau, and we are looking at a film of our visit to Gillian Jagger Studios, film taken by the amazing Rachael Bohlander. And on this occasion, we are honored to be joined by a brilliant young sculptor, Lydia Gladkova. Lydia, welcome. This is a very unusual forum because we visited the studios of the sculptor Gillian Jagger. The studios are out in New York, in Kerhonkson, fairly remote place. And Jillian was a British sculptor, daughter of the British sculptor Sergeant Jagger. And Jillian died about 3 years ago, just a little over 3 years ago. She had some recognition early on in the 60s in New York, where she was casting and making works from casts taken of things in the street, manhole covers and things like that she would take direct cast off. But then she moved out to the country. I'm not sure exactly when she moved, and worked in this huge dairy barn and two other buildings. In fact, we visited altogether 3 buildings, or 4 really, because there's a structure that she had built for one particular work. Unfortunately, these studios are not currently open to the public, which is why this is a unique forum, because other people can't go and see what we saw, at least not for the moment. I sincerely hope that at some point there will be some possibility of some limited access for the public or the interested community to see this, to see these works, to visit these sites. I don't know whether that's going to happen or not, but I sincerely hope that it does. And we are extremely grateful to Michael Branson for facilitating our visit there. Michael was very, very helpful and generous with his time in making it possible for us to go there and to see these situations. And I understand from Michael that what we saw in these studios is pretty much exactly what Jillian left. That virtually nothing has been done. Maybe 1 or 2 works that we were able to see were not visible when Jillian died, but essentially the situation was as Jillian left it. The studios are in barns and therefore not well lit by daylight, in fact hardly lit at all by daylight, and so the lighting in them is quite dramatic. Filming there was quite tricky, and Rachel's done a magnificent job of capturing a sense of what it is like to be there. So I think I'll leave it there for the moment and open up the discussion to whoever wants to jump in. Anybody? Lydia, you remember a visit from Jillian to the studio school when you were a student there a long time ago. I think you said you remembered it and that it was important to you. Would you like to begin there?
Yes, we had a good conversation. I remember it very well. And then she came again, I think the following year, and she invited me there to come to her studios, but it didn't happen. And then I wrote to her again, maybe 2 years later, or a year later, and then again it didn't happen. I think she didn't remember me any longer. And now it did happen. It did happen, and she is no longer here. It was heartbreaking. Because I remembered her very well, although, you know, I'm pretty sure she did not remember me. But for me, it was a very meaningful encounter. And, you know, given that she's no longer here, and the studio, except for the layer of dust, was the way she left it, it was bittersweet, to say the least. It was the way she left it, and left it rather recently. It was very raw to see it. I think her work, her completed work, is raw. But to see it, it is like, it was really like an open wound. That was my impression.
An open wound. I think that's a very powerful image, and not inappropriate. Jock.
Yeah, I was surprised. I didn't know what to expect. Whether we would see sort of hammers and nails or something, just debris in the studio. I was wondering, were we going to see anything more than that? And what we saw was just a whole lot of work. It felt like maybe everything that she'd made, or everything that I'd ever seen of hers, was still in her studio. And I was kind of surprised by that. It's not surprising that a sculptor kind of doesn't sell any of his or her work during his or her lifetime, but I was surprised at how much work was on display, and very effectively displayed in the barns, in the studios. And I don't know, it got me thinking, or I thought, one thing I thought of, I guess, was Van Gogh. Van Gogh sort of didn't sell any of his work during his lifetime, but then suddenly, he's become a superstar. And maybe his world was much smaller, much different from the world Jillian lived in. And I don't see Jillian becoming a superstar tomorrow. And I do see her work as removed from the contemporary art world, but removed in a kind of healthy way. It doesn't belong in, I don't know, the Museum of Modern Art, or today's Museum of Modern Art. Jillian was just a real character, and just a mind different from most sculptors that I've gotten to know. And I was lucky to get, just like Lydia, get to know her a little bit from the studio school, from a show she had at what was then the John Davis Gallery. And it's difficult to summarize any kind of response, or my response to her anyway. But I don't think it's, it's fun trying to figure her out, find a place for her in my world, in the world we all share. I'm looking forward to talking and listening to what everybody has to say about this work.
Brandt.
It's not easy stuff to see or to think about, to to feel or to comprehend. It's kind of inherently elusive because it's so much of, I've been trying to figure this out. It's so much a physical project, and yet it really it doesn't partake of many of the characteristics of an object, of a discrete object, or in some ways even a kind of shapely installation. There's a funny way that there's no difference between inside and outside there.
Yeah, can I just pick up on that? No difference between inside and outside. I mean, I think we'll get later to the barn where the horses are, the last works. Jillian was involved with there. I think that even though there's a lot of stuff crammed into a very small space, one does have a sense of discrete objects. In the big cattle barn, which is what we've been looking at so far, it is very difficult to kind of quite know where one work begins and another ends, although generally one can sort of figure it out. The whole barn is like one huge installation. I had the sensation sitting there, more or less alone with all of this amazing kind of collection of material stuff hanging, dangling, propped up. I had the sensation of being on a stage, of being in a theater, at the end of some extraordinary performance. And I was left with, with the stage set and having to try and figure out what the drama had been about, what had occurred there. And clearly, I had a sense that it was a tragedy. What had been performed was some amazing, absolutely astonishing kind of event. I also had the sense, and this is what you said, the difference between inside and outside. I'm not quite sure what you meant by that, but I had the sense of, the sense that Jillian was somebody who uniquely in our world, I mean, not necessarily absolutely uniquely, but certainly for an artist today, that she was embedded in the physical world in a way that is really unusual and to some extent kind of really not possible for most of us, but that she was embedded in the physical world, in the world that she lived in out there in Kerhonkson, in those meadows and farms, and she dragged that world into her studio, and somehow they gave it another life. But it wasn't this kind of celebration of the abundance of the natural world and its richness and its beauty. It was very much a kind of commemoration of the I don't know, the ruthlessness of the natural world. It's total kind of absence of moral judgment, and it's just ruthlessness of the way in which the natural world continues to operate independently of human intervention. I think Lydia's open wound is a very appropriate kind of metaphor for thinking about what it was one was experiencing there. Except for the horses at the end, where I think something else was going on.
But it wasn't just natural world, because the dead deer roadkill, that's not natural world, it's not a natural occurrence. Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, you're welcome to interrupt.
I think this is key. I mean, Jock said that, that I think it's natural response when you confront this space, her studios, you wonder about her mind. And I think this is key. She had strong, raw emotions about things that most people handle pretty well. I consider myself a highly sensitive person, but I can drive by roadkill just fine. And she couldn't.
Sorry, go ahead. I think maybe you're hinting at, Lydia, you're hinting at something important that should modify what I was saying in a way, because maybe what one was experiencing was not an echo of the natural world, but an echo of the way in which we interact with the natural world, we humans.
Think of this, what we see on the screen now, she cast her dead horse, right? Now, I never had any pets, so I know some people here did. Correct me if I'm talking nonsense, but my understanding is that this knowledge that animals have shorter lifespan than their owners is engraved deeply in people's minds. And what happens, when people experience the loss of a beloved animal, they mourn, they grieve, and they move on, and oftentimes they get a new one, but not Jillian. She couldn't move on.
Well, the horse.
Okay, I'm gonna say something with, I'm saying it with utmost care without implying anything. It reminded me of some people who have autism. It's like she didn't get the memo. Everybody knows that pets die. Everybody knows that seeing that deer by the road is normal, but she doesn't. To her, it's not norm. And it isn't really. Who said it's norm? I think that's very crucial to understanding her.
The horse was a beloved animal, I believe, and died in rather tragic circumstances. Really, and that seemed to be a very tragic and terrible thing to have happened, and seems to have caused Jillian to begin. I mean, I'm speculating here. I don't really know, but the horses that she made towards, when she started work on those in the smaller barn, probably after the death of that beloved animal. This is a piece that we're looking at now, which is out at the back of the two smaller barns, and it's a piece. I don't know if she made it in that situation, but she had this sort of building built around it. It's a sort of shelter for the work. The work is very frontal, and so the shelter is open on one side. It's a kind of small structure that houses this one work. I thought of it as a dragon, and that she built a little shelter for the dragon. It's a lot of tree stumps and other tree material and other things, all strung up and hanging together in a way that is clumsy and terrifying.
Terror is a really operative word here. I think the kind of cruel displacement of things, and the stark, sometimes casual, sometimes deliberate starkness of the lighting, the disorientation that one feels moving around the pieces. It's a prevalent emotion, I think, in the artist, for the artist, and prevalent experience for visitor. And it seems to me, being familiar with her father's work, I see a great deal of, I can't call it continuity. There's a discontinuity between the two of them, because Jillian wanted to have contact with her father, and he died too young for her to have it. And there's a absence and emptiness is a theme, and it's also kind of a mode of expression in her work. And suffering is a kind of a core theme in his work that reappears in hers, and not just as a subject, but I think also as a kind of almost a mode of production, that her materials, bear kind of tragic experience before she finds them, and then they kind of endure, they suffer extraction and incorporation into her work.
Yes,
it's an open thing. It doesn't end. It's still, even the pieces as hung still as they are, and indoors as they are, it hasn't ended. One's aware of it, coming upon it, years later.
Yeah, Jillian's father was in the First World War, I believe, although he didn't, I believe, die in the First World War, but he
Right.
died. Maybe he wasn't. I don't remember now. I'm getting this mixed up.
No, he was one of the most prominent artists of war memorials.
Yes.
After the First World War.
Yeah, after the war. Yeah, so he He died when Jillian was, I think, 4 years old.
Mhm.
So that would, I mean, and that would dramatically condition one's life. I gather that at least for Jillian, he had been, someone she had some connection to as a small child, and that loss, I guess, is something that it just is part of one's being when it happens to someone so young, and that sense of loss is present throughout. I think my experience of the work, a terrible kind of is inconsolable sense of loss, I think, and the work seems to be an attempt to kind of recover something in a way. It's the process of casting, which she used early in her career, and continued to use to some extent, seems to be, in a way, an attempt to capture something, to recapture.
Yeah,
something.
exactly. A means of capture.
Yeah.
A means of grasping and holding something.
Yeah. We're now looking at the smallest space in which Jillian was making these horses out of very flimsy wire mesh and wire, and they're hung up and they're almost impossible to kind of photograph. But we have some images that are giving a sense of what's there, but it's really very difficult to kind of from the images to understand what it was like to be in that space with these animals, which are sort of fantasies. I mean, you can see through the material. They're not massive physical things, although they're large or life size or bigger than the horses. They're like ghosts, and yet they're very animated, and the drawings on the walls are part of the situation. That makes for almost a sense of being in a dream, in that space. It's as if one is not quite able to grasp what's real and what's not, and what's present and what's absent. And I have a prejudice against this kind of. There are other people who make, I think, horses in particular out of material that is, wooden sticks and things like that. I think there are a number of them. I think I'll think of a name in a minute, but
Deborah Butterfield.
Sorry?
Deborah Butterfield.
Deborah Butterfield is one, yeah.
But only one of a number.
Yeah, but perhaps the best known, perhaps the most commercially successful. And yet, so I mean that prejudice, I think, kind of evaporated the more time I spent with these things. Jillian did show, I mean, she did have exhibitions of her work in New York, of some of pieces similar to what we saw. I did see a couple of shows. I must say that much as I enjoyed seeing the work in galleries, it never had the same. It didn't have, to my memory, it didn't have anything like the same kind of presence or impact that it does seen in situ where she made them. And that's possibly, you know, there's you know, an accumulation of stuff there, and the lighting of it is very dramatic. Whereas in a gallery, things have become isolated and you know, cleaned up and feel that some kind of refinement has gone on, even though it may not have. Which is to your point, Brandt, I think that the sense that refinement was not part of the picture, in the sense of moving things towards some kind of ideal. The horses, you know, were I can't get over the sense that they were alive, you know.
They were what?
Alive.
Alive? Okay.
Yeah, you know, while in that space, the sensation was of you know, just a lot of physical material conjuring something that was you know, yeah, horses, but somehow in the end impossible to grasp, you know.
Yeah.
I was thinking superpower when I was in the room with wire mesh horses. I remember I was thinking superpower. She had superpower. First of all, you know, intelligence and skill off the chart. I had no idea how she made them. And this sensation that they're flying. I was also thinking Flying Dutchman.
Yeah,
because it is a sensation that it's moving towards you, like imagined ship or something. So, and I was thinking superpower out of the world. But also for me, because we saw the barn with the this installation with dead animals first, and then we went to see the wire mesh horses, and then we came back. And to me, the wire mesh horses were sort of an entrance to the installation at the barn.
what? I'm sorry, Lydia.
Because it allowed me to see it better, because it had, well, after seeing the wire mesh horses, I saw the same enchanting quality in the installation at the barn with the dead animals. It's this feeling of being in some sort of enchanted forest, right? When you turn around and there is a cat like this. And I wouldn't be so fixated on the fact that they were dead, because I think for her, they weren't quite. I mean, it was, she felt, it was the pain of them being dead, but at the same time, for her, they were very much alive. They were of this world.
The pain is very much alive as well.
Yes, but they were of our world.
Yeah.
I was impressed by the horses that are really drawn, you know, shaped and hewn and fashioned the way, you know, like say her father's sculpture on an armature was. But overall, I think I was kind of most moved by the pieces in which the operations were the simplest and the least. When the vertical piece in that really dark space in which she had hung these big split tree trunks, you know, and it had not done very much to them other than to place them as she did, to notice them, you know, remove them, place them, light them, as she did. And there were models there of them in the space that really made it clear that the framing and the darkness of that barn were essential elements of the piece. It's on the screen now.
These the tree, the kind of tree trunks and those pieces in the big barn.
Yeah, that piece.
They've been sliced open. I mean, sliced amazingly, like
Yeah,
down the middle in some cases. Extraordinary.
but for me,
Also, Brandt, what do you feel about the chains?
you know, it's interesting about the chains. Obviously, they're necessary, and yet there are a great many more chains than she needed. You know, she could maybe, in order to raise and position the thing to begin with, she might have needed more pick points and more chains than she needed to in the end. But it's interesting that she didn't remove any of the chains that weren't in action, because it clearly, you know, chain is a kind of a theme in itself. And it shows up in her father's work as well, in his Calvary.
Yeah, that's why I was at.
Wrapped up in, like, you know, barbed wire and rope and I thought that was, you know, a kind of like almost an elegant essential statement of her themes and method and voice. I thought it was really fabulous.
Yeah.
And one thing that I was struck by, you know, all the way around, is that there's a persistent use of this paradolic method and paradolic impulse.
Paradolic? Could you?
Yeah, it's a, you know, it's a big word for seeing things, seeing one thing in another thing. And well, cloud gazing is one expression for it. You know,
Paradolic,
finding coherent images in incoherent, you know, undeliberate phenomena.
Yeah.
And she had a real way with that. And a kind of like a truth to it. It seemed like she would not contradict the, you know, the original chaos of the material she worked with.
Yeah, she started out casting things, and there's an impulse throughout her work of accepting. Well, initially nature was man-made, the manhole covers, but she accepted the world outside of her. For Jillian, she didn't want to, I don't know, disturb the world outside of her in some sense, or she accepted it in a very matter-of-fact way, and the matter-of-factness about her sort of contradicts or keeps under control the kind of I don't know, romantic impulse that Lydia has been talking about, the sense of feeling pain in these dead or dying animals. She balanced that sense of or that romantic relationship with nature, she balanced that with a kind of matter of factness, and there are two things going on at the same time, it seems to me. I'm not sure that
Yeah.
Yeah, I could, in the big barn, I couldn't help but find myself, I don't really know if I can say this, but you know, thinking of crucifixions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but crucifixions, you know, mixed in with tree trunks, and that, you know, it was the whole of the whole piece matters. It's not just the cat or the deer, or it's the whole piece. And Jillian looks at the whole thing, not just the suffering animal.
Yeah, there's
The
one
balance
piece.
is
Sorry, there's one piece. Just to be clear for the viewers, listeners, there's one piece, very complicated piece with all kinds of stuff, including some carcasses of animals that have somehow or other lost their lives out there. We're not quite sure how. Sorry, you were going to say something, Lydia.
I wouldn't think that balanced is the first word that comes to mind when you want to describe Jillian's work. But although I agree with what Jock said, but it's overall it's hardly balanced.
Well,
yeah, that's in a way, it's in a way that's right, but Jillian herself was just a stable human being, you know, and there's I don't know, there's a wildness about her work, and that, you know, just doesn't fit in anywhere. But she was also, you know, you could hold her hand, she could hold your hand, and bring.
Yeah, very much.
peace.
I met her, and I wanted to see her again.
Yeah,
So,
right. And it's, you know, you have that feeling in the barns. Or it seems to me that just good sense, a healthy relationship with nature, with the world.
healthy.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry, Jack.
Oh, it's deeply healthy to me.
It's
You
vital.
know, it's sorry.
It's vital, but you know, I mean, there's a kind of catharsis going on, but I couldn't call it therapeutic. And I mean, it's not
Yeah, it's not.
harmonic, it's not.
No, I mean, I think that I want to come back to Lydia's wonderful metaphor of an open wound. The sense of openness, that Gillian was open in a way that is not comfortable and not necessarily healthy. I mean, she was open to other people and to other things. There was a kind of rawness, a rawness and a vulnerability. You know, it combined with some kind of, and maybe providing some kind of strength, some kind of extraordinary resilience, toughness. But the openness that one feels the work is evidence of, you know, this kind of connection to the physical world that I mentioned earlier, that is somehow or other, you know, one gets a sense thinking about, I found myself thinking about John Burgess, Pig Earth, that book that he wrote about the life of a community that he lived in for so many years, where people are scratching out a living from the earth, from growing things and keeping animals and slaughtering them and eating them and living in a direct kind of relationship to their means of survival. We don't do anymore, you know. And
yeah, but we think about it, and Berger wrote about it, you know, recently. Wordsworth and Coleridge and, you know, the Romantic poets wrote about it a couple of hundred years ago. And in the current New York Review of Books, there's a philosopher, Martha Nussbaum, writing about animals and how the world dominated by human beings is how does that world engage with animals now? It's you know, it's a sort of it's a human theme, human problem that Jillian engaged with herself in a particular way, a way different from Martha Nussbaum, different from Berger. You know, Jillian made sculpture. She didn't write a book, but she made interesting, real art out of life.
They're very much installations, aren't they? All of this work is a kind of one massive installation in three locations.
Well, but they're discrete. You know, the Rift is different from Matrice and is different from Faith. Is, you know, they're, you know, she was a sculptor. She made sculptures, and
Yeah, but
they're different from Jillian, separate from her.
I think what you say, Jock, sounds like a shapelier, more physically discrete thing, more object-like than her work is. I think her work almost, you know, in a way, it really kind of exists in the head, because it's more an experience than a thing. You know, like if you confront a Brancusi, you have an experience with a thing. You know, an object provokes, you know, thought and feeling, but the object is itself.
Yeah.
And her work is almost not itself. It's a kind of it's like the world blew it in and it'll blow it away again. And what you have is a kind of a glimpse of something ongoing.
Yeah, this is
unstable.
Yeah, this is important. I think Jock Brandt is absolutely right. It's very important, I think, that you say, you know, you know, a Brancusi is out there. You have a relationship to something that is separate from you, that is a thing discrete and exists in its own right as an object, separate from all other objects and from the world, and from you. that's not the case with Jillian's. My experience of this, going to these studios, you're in it. It's not separate from you. You're in it, and you're in danger of being overwhelmed and almost overtaken by it. And it's you know, it's a very powerful experience, but it's not something that you can kind of remove yourself from and contemplate at a distance, the way you could think about a Brancusi. You're in it, and you have to somehow or other cope with it, and without being able to do what, you know, what one does with life, distance oneself in some degree from it. And that seems to me to be essentially what Jillian was about, was making some experience present, giving you something that was, you know, not manageable, really.
I wanted to add, Jock, that Jillian didn't write articles or philosophical essays, but she did leave some writings, and some were on the wall in the barn, one of the barns. I took a photograph. May I read a couple of lines?
Yes, by all means. And I believe that there is an extensive archive, and that Jillian kept very, very extensive notes about, I mean, I don't know what about her work, but about all kinds of things, I imagine. And, you know, that material is being organized, and presumably at some point it may become, or some of it may become accessible. It would be fascinating.
Yeah, they really were, but these two lines that were striking to me. I'm going to read it. Whichever one does is, of course, a matter of belief. I don't believe much in art that is funny.
Could you read it again, please?
Yes. Whichever one does is, of course, a matter of belief. I don't believe much in art that is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I don't.
That's
Art that is funny,
That's
or
right.
okay.
It was, I think it was a statement. One of her exhibitions is dated May 1979.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, that's the matter of factness, or at least to me, I read that as her, you know, reluctance to impose herself, her sort of romantic self on her work, and that's the way she maintains the health of her work.
Yeah, but you can also read it quite literally. You know, what she does is not funny.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I'm not saying anything is. Have I suggested anything is funny?
No.
nobody has suggested that
No, it's
anything funny, and but it's an interesting. It's not irrelevant. I mean, the question of what the place, the relationship of this to, you know, to a sense of humor is something that I found myself pondering, because my experience of Jillian as a living person was that she was indeed funny, and you know, had a great spirit. It was not in any sense depressed or depressing or you know, gloomy. And for all that we've said about suffering and what have you, that, you know, the experience is inspiring. It's not gloomy. It's not depressing, for all that it is about things that are uncomfortable. The experience, my experience at least, was to be. It wasn't joyful, but it was inspiring. It was stimulating. It was
Right.
Yeah.
Healthy, bracing.
Bracing.
Bracing's more like it, Jock. I think it's like it's healthy to know your own predicament, but you know, none of us get out of here alive.
Well, that's a point we might end on. I don't know.
Right.